Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for being here. It is an honor for me as president of Conciencia, I'm Baby Lacrosse, to serve as moderator for this prestigious panel. In this panel, we have Katia Abasagyan, who is an analyst of open cities in the Sunlight Foundation from the United States. Carlos Romeo Alfonso, Secretary of Modernization from the province of Jujuy. Alfonso Massot, Deputy Secretary of International Affairs from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thanks to the three of you for being here. On this panel, we will share experiences on modernization, openness, and participation. And we will discuss the benefits, achievements, and challenges of subnational governments. In order to begin with the first intervention in this panel, I would like to pose to you the following questions to serve as triggers. Each speaker will have 8 to 10 minutes for his or her presentation. Subnational governments are usually the first point of interaction between citizens and the government. It is for that reason that we believe that they play a crucial role when it comes to setting in motion the paradigm of open government. What are the particular advantages that subnational governments may have when implementing modernization and government openness policies?
Hola, ahí está. Han logrado
Have local governments succeeded in getting adjusted to working together with the civil society? What are the challenges that you identified in the governments and in civil society organizations with the purpose of working in collaboration with them? And what kind of solutions have you found that have had an impact on people's lives, or which solutions could be developed through subnational government policies like this? Mr. Alfonso Massot, can you tell us a little bit about the experience in Sao Paulo? I will make some remarks in English in answer to your questions. I don't speak Spanish so well.
Fellow members of this panel and this table, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. I'm honored and pleased to be here in my capacity as Deputy Secretary for International Relations of the São Paulo City Hall to share with you some thoughts and actions on open government. The city of São Paulo is committed to be an open city. Through an open government, we can strengthen democracy and allow citizens to participate and to be truly heard. Therefore, we believe São Paulo Aberta, Open São Paulo, is a true exercise on democracy and on citizenship. With 12 million inhabitants and circa 22 million in the urban area, São Paulo is the largest city in the Americas and the largest one located at the southern hemisphere. It generates 18% of the gross national product of Brazil. That's circa $650 billion, São Paulo only. Due to its size, the city faces many challenges that are very difficult to overcome without citizens' participation. During the previous months of this year, we worked hard to develop projects contemplating social participation, transparency, accountability, and new ways to strengthen governance and shorten distances, advancing the implementation of our first open government plan. The action plan was created by the City Hall together with civil society and OGP, and its 5 commitments reflect the desire to open the city more to participation and to transform the open government agenda into a permanent municipal agenda. The commitments contained in our action plan are: increase the participation of the 32 municipal participative councils, each one composed by an average number of 35 elected councillors. Those 32 councils act to supervise the work of the regional district and prefect directly in their territories. Our commitment aims to foster the participation of these local councils, hearing about their needs and supporting their work. Second, expand and institutionalize the Open Government Agenda training program, which is a capacity building program created to decentralize and to include the citizens in the discussions about the Open Government Agenda, teaching them about municipal participative tools, how to access open data, how to supervise public budget, etc. The third, increase government communication on open government actions, mainly through the creation of an official website about the Open Governmental Agenda and through territorial communication about its concept. The fourth is create a network of civil servants working on open government. And the fifth, to bolster São Paulo City Hall's network of innovation spaces and labs. João Doria, elected mayor in the first round, is committed to empower this agenda in his administration. There is a political will to do so for the first time, having included the action plan in the city's official goals program. São Paulo Aberta, due to its original parallel to the Open Government Partnership and its interaction with different global government, is located in the City Hall's International Relations Department. As the Deputy Secretary of International Relations, I also coordinate the works of São Paulo Aberta, whose projects aim to articulate, integrate, and promote open government actions in the city government and with civil society. Besides this initiative, different programs dealing with open government were created in the city government, such as Mobilab and Patio Digital. Those 2 municipal innovation labs deal with open data from transportation and education departments and search to promote innovation through the involvement of different stakeholders. Both spaces are the structure to incubate and develop projects, apps, and different innovation solutions based on public and open data, taking into account organized civil society to co-create. The continued work of those labs relates to our commitment about fostering innovation spaces at the City Hall. 2 good examples of projects created on those initiatives were Where is My Bus, an app with real-time GPS data from the Transportation Department, and a platform still in construction aiming at disclosing information about public school meals and to request feedback from students and parents. I also wish to address the creation of CIGA, which is the Interdepartmental Open Government Committee, and its unified work to encourage the open government agenda through the different municipal secretariats. CIGA was created under the same decree that institutionalized the work of São Paulo Aberta. This committee is composed by 13 municipal departments, such as the General Controllership, Government Department, Communications, Human Rights, Regional Prefectures, Transportation, among others. And it is presided by the International Relations Department. The committee is an important instrument to help the development of São Paulo's action plan and to implement the above mentioned commitments. One of our commitments is dedicated to work closely to the municipal participative councils. As mentioned before, there are 32 different participative councils in São Paulo, one to each regional prefecture at the city administrated by a regional mayor. São Paulo Aberta team held open meetings in each district to discuss the difficulties and ways to empower those councils. The feedback report from the meetings is sent to different municipal departments which are committed to develop projects and ideas to overcome the obstacles faced. Hearing and understanding the citizens directly in their residential areas is essential to a real disclosure of the administration. Another commitment deals with the concerns about turning the open government agenda permanent in the city government. A network of civil servants was created to discuss access to information, open government, and to develop sectorial projects. During 2017, selected officials attended meetings, workshops, lectures, and classes about those themes. The objective is to spread the knowledge through different municipal departments and to foster social participation, transparency, accountability, and innovation. This network also aims to discuss the legal aspects of the Access to Information law. This ambitious law was passed in 2011 at a national level and in 2012 at the city's level. But the truth is that there was no political will to implement this these laws. The political will became effective from the beginning of this year at the city level. Teaching citizens about open government and allowing them to participate on this debate is essential. It is a clear two-way path. It's not only, I wouldn't say that it's not only to teach the people how to observe the law, this new law that we have, but also to hear from the people. It's a two-way street. Because if you only teach them how to access the government is one thing, but it's important to establish a network to collect the data and whatever they wish to be changed by the government. An open government cannot be sustained without citizens' involvement. Sharing and exchanging are at the core of the concept. Bearing this in mind, a capacity building program was created, calling selected civil society representatives to develop workshops to be offered to different audiences. One of this year's commitments was to expand this program. The new version of the program hired 56 open government agents to offer more than 1,600 hours of classes in all districts of the city. So far, more than 18,000 people attended our capacity building program, from civil servants, municipal students, politicians, organized civil society members, to councillors and general audience. It is important to recognize that, in reality, we are reaching a much broader audience, especially through a multiplier effect. We believe this is an important project and is planned to be continued in the years to come. We are proud at the work we have done so far as a pioneer subnational government. In addition, we do believe open government projects are essential at the subnational level, since it is at this level that the citizens act and are truly reached and impacted. The national level is very much conceptual, and the state or provincial level. But the municipal level is the level very much in touch with the people, in touch with the population, in touch with their needs. We are glad about the upcoming continuity of such an important program and look forward to new challenges, experiences, and projects with OGP and the other 14 subnational governments, which also developed important commitments and have been supportive about our work. To conclude, let me say a few words about Brazil. As many of you probably know, we are going through challenging times in my country, very challenging. But these times are also a clear demonstration of the transparency, strength, and resilience of our democratic institutions. Our institutions have been working tirelessly to fight corruption in these last years. And the best way to achieve this goal is through transparency in public administration. In this context, São Paulo Aberta and open government, encouraging transparency and participation definitely helps to prevent such issues at the municipal level. I would like to thank OGP for inspiring our governments to new solutions to rethink public administration, taking into account civil society inputs. Conversely, we hope our hard work at São Paulo administration could also be inspiring to other local and national governments, and that our desire for a truly open government could be shared with you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muchas gracias y esperemos que sea así.
Thank you very much, and we really hope it will be as you say. Now, Katia Abazajan, what is your view from the civil society?
Katya, I'm with the Sunlight Foundation on the Open Cities team, and our perspective as a civil society organization is likely a little bit unique. My organization partners directly with cities through a project called the What Works Cities Partnership, and we train and advise cities on how to launch open data policies, launch open data programs, and then put those programs into action. So our view at the moment, our work is tracking the development of open data policy, but also helping the cities that we work with in the partnership to transition into a mindset of action. So at the moment, in the United States, we've tracked over 100 open data policies in cities nationwide. 50 of those have been policies that Sunlight directly assisted with. And of those 50, 15 of them used crowd law platforms and co-creation in order to develop the policy language. So co-creation is something that has come up a lot through the course of this conference, and there are a lot of ways to improve the way that co-creation is done in order to make it more effective. What it looks like for us, for example, is that in the city of Arlington, Texas, which we worked with, they put their policy online, on an online platform. Residents were invited to comment, and the city started attending events around town where groups were convening. So they were particularly interested in growing the participation of the business community in their open data program. So they attended an affinity group meeting for business people and for startups. So they tried to reach entrepreneurs. And they presented the policy, they asked for feedback, but they also got to talking about other challenges that the businesses shared in the community with the city. The city realized that a lot of the challenges that businesses face with using data were the same as they were facing inside their city departments to use data. So the city staff decided to start attending those meetings regularly and start sharing ideas with the people of that group. So it became a mutual exchange, and it's something fairly intangible. You know, we don't know how to teach how to participate and collaborate in a natural way in which the city learned to do that. So what we're trying to do now is train cities on how to use simple tactics and use face-to-face interaction to start generating that collaboration. Because now the city of Arlington would like to know what's next. How do we make this relationship into something actionable and meaningful? So what we've done as an organization is we've started to develop tactics that cities can use, and we developed a framework called Tactical Engagement with Data. So what that means is that we put together a guide that is essentially a framework for cities to use that has a set of tactics that they can use to go out into the community and do something in the short term that opens a door that might lead to something else. So the goal of this process is something that I've heard come up many times today, and I'm very glad that people are interested in it, but it's just to facilitate the use of data in communities by people who need that information. And cities are uniquely positioned to do that, in our opinion. Cities, like we've heard many times, are the first entry point for citizens to open government. And more than at the federal level, cities are focused on service delivery and physical spaces. So it only makes sense that staff working in cities use those strengths to their advantage. It makes sense for them to go into physical spaces and start meeting residents where they are. And as an organization, what we're trying to do is capture those best practices and those stories and share them out and share to other cities the successes that cities have used to actually reach residents. An example of one of those tactics that's included in our guide is a data user group, which is something that we saw worked very well in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So in Pittsburgh, the city government works with the county and the local library and the local university. And together, they run a user group at the library that meets monthly about a specific issue. Anyone is invited to go. The librarians tell people about it in their day-to-day work. People show up just if they're interested in, say, transportation. And it's not framed as a data activity. It's not framed as a hackathon. It's not framed in any way that would exclude someone who doesn't have experience with data or technology. It's intended to just be for people to talk about transportation issues. So a staff member from the city will show up to the meeting, university researchers will show up, bike activists will show up, people who are just interested in the bus route that goes through their neighborhood will show up. And someone will facilitate a meeting in which the city will get to run new ideas past this group of interested people. They'll say, we're building a new data portal for transportation data, and we're hoping that it'll show us where pedestrian accidents are happening. Would that work for you? And the residents who are in attendance can say yes or no. They can say, this would work for me or this wouldn't. And the city is able to take that feedback back. And what it does, even though it's a fairly small thing and it's very focused, is that it builds a culture of openness at the city where cities and members of the government are expecting to hear feedback on the work that they're doing, and they're expecting to have to run it past someone before they build it. And that's something that I think is really important, and that our role as a civil society organization really means that we're encouraged to support, is that we need to teach governments to radically value the voices of residents. And we need to teach them to think that a resident's opinion is the most important thing before delivering a service. One thing that I know everyone probably is aware of is that cities are all facing the same issue. They're all at the point where they understand that transparency is important, they understand that open data is important, but nobody is using the information. And we see this in almost every single city that we work with. There are very few cities that have cracked this problem. And what we are seeing is that there are these short-term, smaller successes that over time will build a more open culture. So that's where we got the idea for this framework, and that's where we hope that the open data movement will go, that by slowly opening relationships to the city and by building a more transparent culture, that city staff members will soon understand that residents need to be the first point of contact for anything that they do, and that resident needs need to be represented in every point of service delivery, information release, public data release, everything. So that's our goal.
Muchas gracias, Katia.
Thank you, Katia. Now, with some peculiarities. Carlos Romeo Alfonso, who is the Secretary for Modernization in the province of Jujuy, will have the floor. Thank you for the invitation. It is an honor for me to be part of this panel. Let me share with you the experience of the province of Jujuy with implementation of access to public information. Let me begin by explaining to you what my province is like. It has a big geographic diversity. You will have different landscapes and different types of terrain. It also has a broad cultural diversity. On the ground floor, we have an exhibition here last month showing the culture of Jujuy. This is a province that finds it difficult to have access to its entire population. Sometimes the citizens cannot have easy access to education, healthcare, and even to drinking water. In 2015, when I came to the government, some of the officials realized that there was a lot of hidden information, a lot of obscure information in the government. There was obscurantism, and we realized that it was important to enter a strategic partnership with the civil society and with our citizens. Why? Because we needed to democratize again the government, considering evaluation, monitoring of the performance and the public administration, because we had quite an erratic level of information, a lot of inaccuracies. So we engaged in carrying out state reform. We passed a number of laws, including one on access to public information through an executive decree that led to some adjustments to this law. And at present, we are trying to ensure there is transparency in every act of government and also full access to public information by citizens. The main pillars of our work are the following. We have open government and we have an open government and transparency department that is working with full commitment. Sometimes they face difficulties in effecting a change in the culture. We are working around 4 main areas. That is the speed up of the processing of requests for information through open data platforms. We also have the information units for open government set up in each ministry with a permanent working committee. We also have the duty of active transparency and the publication in the provincial gazette. So it is very important to highlight that we have established procedures that allow citizens to initiate requests for information. There is a portal, www.gajujuy.gov.ar, and you can have access to this portal and look at the details of this information that I'm sharing with you. Any citizen, in person or through a representative, can make a request for information by filling out a form or online. So the first step is the approval by the relevant office, and then the second step has to do with the search for that information. This is not a minor issue, considering the complex information systems that we used to have in our administration. So now We have almost a 100% response rate, and we are fully compliant with the law. We should also note the duty to active transparency. This brought about a significant change in Jujuy because we published the full organizational chart of the government of the province of Jujuy with all the authorities, the salaries of each official, also the affidavit and the tax returns of all those officials are published. And this had a great impact on society because in the past, citizens did not know what the assets and the net worth of officials was and where. And we also have a significant role now in the anti-corruption office. We try to have a user-friendly budget so that people can have access to budgetary information that is not so technical. And we also publish information on all the employees working for the administration. Also, we have information on all the goods and services that have been hired or procured and all the tenders. And so we still have a long way to go, of course, but we have done a significant amount of work. We started in quite a difficult situation, and as I said earlier, access to information is not something that was easily implementable in Jujuy. Upon the initiative of the Transparency Department, we were able not only to get the executive power involved, but also the Ombudsman's office and the other branches of power and the Controller's office, because these are bodies that also play a very important role. And we have the controlling bodies that play a very important role in the defense of the interests of citizens. So it is very important for us to get them involved in this process. We are also currently working to make sure that the municipal governments also support this initiative. In the capital city, the government is working with a focus on open government, but we still need to reach out to other local governments. There is a cultural problem, a problem of economic structures, so we need to look for different ways of changing the situation to give people access to public information. Sometimes it is very difficult to sustain the posting of information on a monthly basis about all the actions that a government carries out. But this is the big challenge for us in the province of Jujuy. We have strong leadership in the governor and his cabinet. They are fully aware of the needs of people also living in remote areas. So this is, in summary, what we have been doing in our province. And we know that we still have a long way to go, but perhaps we are one of the pioneers in the country in fostering transparency and innovation in the administration. Thank you.
¿Cómo fue la actitud?
How have governors or rulers responded to such transparency? Their reaction, their attitude has been positive. At the senior levels, there is always a predisposition, mostly when there is a change of administration. But we may face the middle and lower management levels being somewhat reluctant to provide information or having this predisposition for greater clarity and transparency. So we have to work a lot on the staff training, making them understand in the municipalities that this is not a control and oversight by the provincial executive, but they are providing information to the citizens. Public servants and the elected officials should understand that this is for the greater transparency of the state administration, the government at all levels. In view of these achievements and the challenges and all the work you are conducting, what, in your view, is the open government agenda at the subnational level, and what challenges do government and civil society face ahead?
Un poco de español. A ver.
I will practice my Spanish. Before answering your question, I wanted to make a follow-up comment on what our colleague from Jujuy said. The law on access to information in Brazil has already been enacted, but it should be disclosed and taught to the population. It is not enough to have a legal text if people have no knowledge on how to enforce it. In the city of Sao Paulo, we have set up specific offices in many sectors of the 32 prefectures, in schools, at collective spaces, just precisely to provide capillary education for the citizens on how to enforce the law of access to information. All data are there. Public servants are bound to disclose how much they make, how much they earn, as my colleague has just said. And this is what happens. Everybody knows how much I make, because this is disclosing action. So some people were trained, people who were selected through a competitive process, so they go to these offices to teach, to train. And this highly controlled process has a significant multiplying effect. Sao Paulo, or any Brazilian citizen, even though Brazil is quite developed, is not Canada or Sweden, where the individual's human rights are naturally sustained: the right to education, basic and higher education, the right to good health care services. We make a lot of efforts, but the shortage of resources renders this insufficient. But it is good to know where this insufficiency lies. So it is not just a question of showing the public servant or the resident how to get to the public servant, but to hear the resident. So these people go to the schools to check whether the snack, the food, the meals are the right ones, so the parents there can tell the person what they actually believe, and that is recorded. The same happens with hospitals. If the clinicals, the medical supplies are available or not, and this information is gathered with the purpose of improving the service. So as I said at the beginning, it's a two-way road. And next year, we will enhance the way from the people to the government even stronger. Next year, it will be the year for actually receiving the residents' demands to repair mistakes. Thank you.
The successes so far have been, both in cities in the United States and in many of the governments present here, have been in establishing a strong foundation for transparency and open data. So, as I said, policies are strong. Many of the governments here have a policy or an office of engagement or new channels that they've established as part of these efforts towards transparency that will allow people to engage. However, I think the largest challenge that lies ahead is to make that participation real, and to not only recognize that the challenges are there, but like my colleagues have said, make those connections actually impactful. One thing that we heard in the city of Madison recently was that people were using those channels, that they felt that they were sending their feedback online. They were showing up to city council meetings. They were trying to participate, but the problem was that when they sent a comment in online, they never got even a form letter to say that it had been received. There was never a summary of the feedback to show what had been done. They didn't get reached out to again when the issue came up in city council 2 months later. So in that regard, there's still a lot left to be done. Even though people are able to engage, there's not the expectation that engagement will be a conversation or that their opinions will even be heard. And I think that's a really large hurdle, because it's not only about establishing infrastructure and implementing policy, it's about shifting the way you interact with people. And that's something that's hard to explain, and it's fuzzy, and there's a lot of learning left to be done around it.
Pero eso es un tema de...
Is that a communication issue, or is it that the citizens' requests are heard but are not responded?
These are not responding, and it's hard to say which it is if there's no transparency. It's hard to say if the comment was actually received, if the signal got lost somewhere between 10 different departments that were trying to do this project. So it's a little bit of both. City staff, I think, should be trained to be under the impression that they are expected to respond and they're expected to communicate, because I think that's a failure in, or something that needs to be worked on in most cities. But also, it's true that many citizens don't know whether their feedback is actually used, and one best practice that we've seen is that cities that work on open data policies sometimes will take the entire raw spreadsheet of the comments that they received and put that up online with inline responses to each comment. And that's something that's very effective, because it makes people feel like their comment has actually been read by someone, and there's proof of that.
Podría añadir,
Let me add something along these same lines. The law on access to public information and the national plan in Brazil sets forth a deadline of 20 days to give a reply to the question or the request by the citizen. So if somebody asks a question, you have at the most 20 days to provide a reply. And this goes to the official responsible for this. In Jujuy, we also have a period of 15 days. If it is justifiable, you can add another 10 days. And if officials do not provide a reply in due time, they are sanctioned, they are punished. And let me comment on the involvement on the part of the city employees from the point of view of training mainly. As Horacio Rodríguez Larreta said this morning, we have seen significant progress in the city of Buenos Aires in citizenship engagement and also in co-creation processes. So making progress in that arena could be very important for the province of Jujuy. The fact of having a participatory budget can also be one way of responding to the needs of the citizens. Thank you. Now we have a few minutes for questions from the floor. Let me see if anyone wants to ask a question.
Hola, sí, bueno, yo...
I'm Gustavo Coxa. I'm speaking here on my own individual capacity. I have requested information at the national and municipal level for in more than 25 cases. I never got a reply, and when I got a reply, in 90% of the cases I got something that had nothing to do with my request. So there is no punishment to those responsible for providing a response. So I think that you should work seriously. If you have data to support this, please disclose those figures. And the basic question is, how do you deal with the red tape, with the trend to red tape that occurs when there is a mass request for information? Did you ask for that information in Sao Paulo? Not in the city of Buenos Aires and also at the national level. There is a law at the national and at the city level. Well, maybe I'm not the right person to answer that. In Jujuy, we have on our website all the requests for information and all the replies given. Well, I'm saying this so that perhaps this can be escalated to the national authorities or to the city authorities. And how do you deal with this tendency to having red tape when you deal with mass requests for information?
Bureaucracy in many city departments is amplified by the fact that cities currently aren't structured in a way to be free-flowing information back and forth between departments. The issue of information and data in cities is fairly new for the most part, and so there aren't effective structures in what I've seen in American cities to pass information between departments, which seems from the outside like it should be easy to do, but in fact is so bogged down in the history of how departments have interacted with each other fairly separately. So I think that's a larger problem of developing more infrastructure, more points of contact for data requests, more people who are owners of information within city departments.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I'm Felix Madariaga. I come from Nicaragua, from the Institute of Strategic Studies and Public Policy. I would like to know your opinion on whether there are any good practices that could be extended to Central America, where we have city governments that are truly reluctant to implementing open government and transparency processes. However, we do have political parties that are the minority in the city councils that do want to push open government principles, but since they are the minority, they cannot do much. So, in other words, how can you work with some council members or with political parties that are part of the opposition or part of the minority, but are true allies in transparency policies, although the ruling party may close the doors for them? I'm interested in knowing the good practices in that area. In my humble opinion, there you need the political will of governors or of officials. And in order to have a generalized or a widespread political will, you need to choose the right person at the time of elections. That is the first step. Secondly, these officials should have a law on transparency, a law on access to public information as part of their action plan. Without transparency, you cannot fight against corruption. So there needs to be very clear objectives in the plan of the person who is going to run that city. In Brazil, we have a law on access to information, and we have had it since 2011. It was a reflection of the open government partnership that was launched that same year in the United Nations. That is why we have an international department in our government. But at that time, we didn't have the political will to put it into practice. I'm speaking on behalf of Sao Paulo. Today, we do have the political will in the mayor of Sao Paulo and also the central government. The law at the central government level was pushed by public opinion. As I said, we are going through many challenges in our country, but the people took to the streets in 2013. Millions of people were protesting against corruption, and this has been widely known, and there has been endemic systemic corruption that abused of power. So people took to the streets, and they exerted a lot of pressure in 2013, in 2014. So we changed the administration because of the people's pressure and also because of the decision in Congress. So this strengthened the political will to push transparency and to fight against corruption. Without that political will, you cannot do anything. Nobody could run for a civil service position in Brazil. Next year, we will have elections for the House of Representatives, 2/3 of the Senate, and also for some other positions. So we will be able to confirm the results of the pressure from people in the streets claiming for transparency. But political will plays a key role. Yes, I fully agree. I believe that it's very important to have political will, to have the awareness, and also to have the support of the city governments to the law. I think that the city councils play a very important role there. I believe that awareness raising has to do with the political will.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Good afternoon. My question is, what measurement techniques do you use to evaluate the impact of the open government policies that you have put in place? Thank you.
Our experience, that is a difficult thing to measure because every policy lays out different objectives. But one thing we are trying to do for each city that we work with on open data policy is track what the commitments are within each policy and start comparing them across cities. So Sunlight is currently working on a web resource that will be available online that will track the commitments that multiple cities have made, and then we'll begin to tie them to what implementation practice it outlines. So that's very much a work in progress, but in many cases we see that cities are looking to demonstrate that they've actually put in place the governance structures, the workflows, the channels for participation. So many of the things that we're able to measure are tangible, but they don't explain the entire breadth of the issue of what we're trying to address with open data policy. So it's harder to measure those intangible things like how many new people did you introduce to your government by crowdsourcing input on the policy or by publishing it publicly. Those things are more based on relationships, and so they're harder to evaluate. And that's something that I think as this field develops more will probably become clearer as an issue, is that we need to figure out what it actually looks like when a city does go beyond just implementing the measures in the policy and starts building relationships and making connections that are actually making the policy impactful. And as a field, we'll have to figure out how to measure those things.
So I am Juliana Sakaya. I come from Transparency Brazil. Some of you spoke about political will and how to measure transparency, and you say that it is difficult to measure that. If we bring these two topics together, I think that the political will is not something intangible, something that cannot be measured, because precisely we can talk about political will and what the budget is how many people are working, what expenses are being incurred. There is a lack of human resources in general in the administration in Brazil, so perhaps we will have a new plan for 2018. So I would like to ask Mr. Massot whether we can have that political will in order to have more financial and human resources available for Sao Paulo. I thank you for your words and your question. In our actions under the Sao Paulo Open Initiative, we have 8 civil society organizations, including Transparency Brazil. Transparency Brazil has played an instrumental role in the drafting of our action plan, and I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for your contribution to our work. We expect next year to have more resources because the mayor's office had a deficit of 7.5 billion reales inherited from the prior administration, almost $3 billion. So this was the first year in which we could reduce expenditure in order to restore the balance in our accounts, because we cannot always be on a deficit. We have a big city to run, and we need to deal with some urgent problems like hunger and education and schools. So these are priority issues for us. And we need to work on these in parallel with open government initiatives. But we are sure that in the budget for next year, we will have more resources to work together with Transparency Brazil, with Article 19, and with other civil society organizations. This year, we were able to diagnose the main challenges. We had a lot of replies from the citizens, and we systematized those results through the offices that I mentioned before. We have 41 representatives of civil society working with these offices. So this is a well-established project, and I think that next year we can be confident that we will have more resources. Thank you.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Rather than a question, I'd like to make a contribution. I'm Joel Salas from Mexico. So, in tune with our Brazilian colleague and the Argentine colleague, we should understand that open government is not just political will. Why? Because if we start from the premise that it's both transparency and participation, the components of open government, if governments are requested to do something, political will come naturally. So in the case of Argentina and Brazil, now that they do have a law of access to information, which is the basic pillar to ensure, to guarantee the citizens that they will have access to information and then use it, the population has very powerful instruments to demand the political will to exist. So as you take two to tango, if there is no will, The citizens of the region nowadays have very powerful instruments, which are the laws of access to information, to lead their officials to the will. So it's very important to put on the table the discussion of the construction of open government, not just from the political will, but that the society can request the request the government. It's been the civil society, the one who's posed significant demands, among them the new access to information law, which has been qualified by many as the best. The issue here is to achieve full compliance of that law. And just as our Argentine colleague said, how do we make our laws a reality? And that is the challenge faced by the region. Let me commend you by the characteristics of your Mexican law. In Brazil, we also have a law of access to information, which is certainly not just a political will, the one that will solve the problem. I fully agree with your comments, but political will was necessary for the law to be created. That is important. Now we have the law, and we have the popular pressure. People are interested in the law, and we are educating the people on how to use the law so that we can hear them better. The question of bureaucracy, of red tape, the mention made by the previous question, well, that is also essential. We have to educate. There is red tape. The officials of any municipality, of any government, are bureaucrats. So they should change their mindset to feel at the service of the population. They should not be in an ivory tower managing the things as if they were the lords. No, we are all serving, we are all at the service of citizens. And that is the project of Open São Paulo. It is a project of citizenship. It is a project of democracy. And it is a project against bureaucracy. That is what we are involved in at present. I am Maria Paula Angel from Colombia. My question is, in your cities, these open government policies, have they been tied with policies of smart cities, or do you see both policies as separate things? In the case of Jujuy, they were not tied with smart cities policies, though I do believe that there should be some link here. Now, in my capacity as Modernization Secretary, in our current infrastructure, we are on the road to comply with the commitment of modernization of the states. This is an area we have to work on, and we will amend this deficiency we are now in, which is the smart city.
American cities, we see smart city policies and open data policies as fairly separate, because while they are part of the same initiative and the same general movement towards modernization, an open data policy should express exactly which data should be public. So which data belongs to the residents, which data is not private or sensitive, and which data should be published publicly for people to access. So in some cases, we prefer for that policy to come first, because smart city technology is, in some cities, beginning to outpace the ability of government to manage what that technology is actually collecting and doing. In many American cities, we have initiatives like sidewalk labs that are run by Google or other major technology companies. And if the city hasn't thought through the rules of public information or the rules of privacy policy and where that begins and ends, then it's maybe potentially a dangerous situation for companies to be in control of data that belongs in the public's hands. So open data policies are more, in our experience, geared towards establishing the rules of what should be public versus private. And smart city policies are another route to go towards modernization for cities.
Yo estoy de acuerdo.
I agree with her remarks, but there are two issues here. Open cities is transparency, the fight against corruption, educating the population on how to access the services, and get from the governments what they want. But smart cities is also a very important concept, because this smart cities changes this process into an easier, more innovative process. So I think we should combine both. Mayor Doria from Sao Paulo in recent months has been touring and visiting countries where he exchanged with colleagues on smart cities, so that Sao Paulo gradually may become, at least in some areas, into a smart city itself. And the apps and the labs that are being implemented in Open Sao Paulo are, in a way, an indication of this intention. Sao Paulo has to be a smart city, so that this is a high-tech process. Good afternoon. I'm Claudio Castelo from Sao Paulo, Brazil. What instruments has each city available to preserve the open data initiatives from changes in the political scenarios? What are the instruments the cities have to preserve themselves against changes? Could you please repeat the question? What are the instruments each city has available to preserve the open data initiatives against changes in political scenarios? Well, politics change. The political scenarios are always changing. Actually, there are changes of political scenarios in every election, but there is memory in the administration. The administration receives the questions from the counterparts, answers them, improves the management and the administration, and these decisions are consolidated by the administration. So I do not see that there is any so fundamental government or political change that could delete or erase what has been done, unless it were a dictatorial government. With Open Sao Paulo, what we will achieve will be archived, and it can be consulted upon by citizens just like yourself. I think it is part of a new thinking of public management. As our colleague says, the fact that through a web page or the records, the information obtained and the culture developed being stored is a significant progress. In Jujuy, we are taking the first steps in this, but I understand this should be preserved throughout time, and I don't think that this should be lost in any change of management or administration.
Cities. So our project is a mayor-driven initiative. The mayor signs on to be a part of the What Works Cities partnership. But part of our work is training members of specific departments on how to be data owners and how to be responsible with data. So that training doesn't go away. And while we have had issues with mayoral transitions affecting the willingness of those people to actually do their work, they are, once they believe that their role is intertwined with the use of data, it's easier to sustain that work. So our goal is really to establish specific processes of releasing data that are embedded at the department level and even at the service provision level, so that specific staff in cities are changing the way that they do their job permanently.
Hola.
I am from the District of Florida, Uruguay. A question for Carlos Romero. You said that the request for information of public access by citizens, my question was for citizens, for residents. My question is, are foreigners allowed to make a request? Actually, I'm not fully informed, but I understand that it is possible. There is nothing that prevents it. There's a speaker not using the mic.
Pero gracias. Y la otra era...
And the other was your deadline, 15 working days. Again, the speaker now is not using the mic.
Ah, bien, bien. Ay, qué cordobesa que soy.
Yes, it's not a requirement to have an extension of 10 days. There are extraordinary requests. For instance, we have the National Day of the Students, which is a very important day for us, for the promotion of the province. And there have been cases for budgetary reasons, for instance, where a group of people, and this is in response to his comments about collective request on a specific issue. For instance, there may be requests that is 5 pages long. Obviously, the agency in 10 or 15 days is not going to be able to reply. So there is an exception requested. Considering the characteristic of the request, we apply for an extraordinary extension. It is actually administrative working days. So we also mediate or intermediate with the requestor, explaining that this is a collaboration relation. So the requester feels that, in a way, he's receiving a reply. There is no silence. Thank you very much. And now the last question. This openness faces citizens that are disappointed because corruption is still there. However, there are cases where openness is good. in the fight against corruption, such as in contracting or the statement of conflicts of interest. In your experience in cities management, how do you manage open procurement? Is there any publication of contracts, any tracking of contracts after they have been awarded? Because they can have a life of 20 years. In my city, most scandals of corruption have been related to the services agreement, for instance, for public cleaning services. And second question, is there any record disclosing conflicts of interest of public servants that afterwards go to the private sector? In Jujuy, we are fully aware that our current laws are obsolete, should be updated. The specific law for the procurement of goods and services, a new bill is being discussed, and other laws as well. So they should be updated. And this also requires oversight and control, and certainly conflict of interest in the anti-corruption office and other government agencies for the evaluation of public management. They should be involved. In my province, the Public Audit Control Office should be involved, and certainly the People's Ombudsman.
Collecting data is the best proactive way to combat corruption in cities. Sunlight produced with the Open Contracting Partnership a list of guidelines that are on our website for an open contracting policy. And those, I think, establish the groundwork for what should be a transparent process, and what in many cities is not seen as part of transparency because cities are so focused on operations and services for the most part. But it's a very important part of developing a culture of transparency, because often that is combating corruption and getting information about conflicts of interest is often the first way that people get involved in advocating for open government. So we see that as very important.
Bueno, en Brasil y sobre todo en
In Brazil, in particular in Sao Paulo, today, all contracts entered into with the government are open, transparent, and published. There is an obligation to publish them. There is no way of hiding the contracts. All of them are open, and employees are hired on the basis of a competitive process, except for some specific positions where you need a dependable person for a short-term period of time. But there is a need to have a lot of oversight of all the contracts entered into with private companies, public tenders for construction work. So I think that, unfortunately, as a result of all the problems we faced in the last 5 years, we are now in a control situation. We have the control and oversight at the different levels of government. To conclude, we will share with you a few closing remarks highlighting some of the ideas posited in this exchange. The messages that I take home with me to continue working in my foundation, the Foundation Conciencia, this idea of continuing working in this direction and bringing more civil society organizations closer to the OGP. I thank you all for your comments, for having shared your subnational experiences, for having answered all the questions that we asked you. and the opinions that you have shared with us confirm the potential that subnational governments have when they put in practice the goal of the OGP to make sure that governments engage in an openness process with their daily challenges in order to become more transparent, more participatory, and to come up with new ways of reaching out to citizens in order to co-create public policies. The lack of trust among citizens vis-à-vis their governments is a reality. As we have said here, this is a challenge both for the different levels of government and for all the stakeholders involved and engaged with the objective of citizenship participation. So we need to continue disseminating information and raising awareness among citizens so that they know their laws. We believe that citizen engagement is sound ground where we can develop tools and find ways to put in practice all these ideas. This agenda requires the involvement of all partners, and I believe that the civil society can contribute significantly. I should note once again the big opportunity that this represents for civil society organizations. Spaces like this meeting are very important. And this invites us to get carried away. Although we know that we have a long way to go, sometimes it will be a difficult road. The first steps have already been taken, and they have been firm steps, and they require the protection and the work of all of us involved to continue developing open government. Thank you.